Geriatric Zhongli will rain order down upon your enemies, and today I'm gonna tell you how to build him best. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So what artifacts does this ancient dragon desire? None other than 4-piece Archaic Petra. This will be able to buff your team's elemental damage wonderfully, only being 5% less of a buff than Cinder City. Its main flaws are that he has to actually pick up the elemental crystals himself in order to proc the 4-piece buff. And he can only buff one source of elemental damage at a time through this method. So in an Arla team, you want to make sure he picks up a Pyro Shard as an example. This will be especially splendid in mono damage teams, such as a Nuvi Farina combo, since it's very difficult to mess up picking up the right shards. Fantastic choice for him with some mild gameplay caveats. You could even consider 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith. This will be quite nice and consistent in attack DPS based teams. It's a bit restrictive these days since we have so many HP based characters, but it will work like a charm when you're using the old man with attack scaling damage dealers. The 2-piece offering some HP percent aids his shield's protectiveness too. Great choice on him with less minor gameplay caveats compared to Petra, however it may be a bit more restrictive in this current day and age. 4-piece Noblesse can work as a source of attack percent buffing, but I don't really like it on him. Because Zhongli's burst takes so long to cast, it really isn't worth using it 99% of the time, unless you really just want to admire how cool it looks. The field time taken isn't worth the buffs, and typically speaking, you'll have another Noblesse user in teams that want one in the first place. It works on him, so I'm mentioning it, but keep in mind that Tenacity suits him much better if it's attack percent buffing that you're looking for. 2-piece mix and match sets include 2-piece HP percent, Geo percent, burst percent, attack percent, and shield percent. As for Zhongli's main stats, simple. There are 2 ways in which you can build him, Shield Bot Li or Sub DPS Li. For Shield Bot Li, go for HP percent, HP percent, HP percent. This build is dead simple. His shield gets bulkier with the more HP that you build upon him. This much HP essentially makes the guy immortal, it's as simple as that. As for Sub DPS Li, go for HP percent, Geo percent, crit percent. It's a bit awkward how he's split scaling, but generally going for HP percent with Geo percent and crit percent will get you the best of both worlds. A strong shield alongside some decent Geo numbers. You can consider swapping his Goblet out for an HP percent one if all you're interested in is making sure that his burst can crit, but the damage dealt won't be particularly exemplary without a Geo Goblet to assist. An attack percent stance will be sacrificing all of his shield bulkiness, which just isn't worth it on this guy. He doesn't do enough damage to justify doing that. Shield Bot Li is a much better use of him in my opinion, but if you want him to do his own numbers, then this is the way to go. Know that if you're using an HP percent weapon like Black Tassel or Dialogues, then an ER percent sans works too if you're short on energy. As for Zhongli's substats, simple, go for this. Yup, don't need ER since his burst kinda sucks, and crit only matters if you are building him around said burst. So HP percent becomes the only necessary stat for you. Some extra crit rate is welcome too if you want an easier time proccing Fav Lances. While I'm showing his ER requirements right now, genuinely do not bother unless you specifically want to build him as a sub DPS. His burst's field time is such a bummer, as that really killed off its value. I personally would avoid trying to care about his damage at all, but I know that a whole lot of you are simps for him that want to give it a shot anyways. Fav Lance will have you covered most of the time in the first place. These rankings are based on damage, but you're seriously not using Zhongli for his own DPS. Consider the utility of these sets first and foremost before caring about the damage that he himself is dealing. This sheet is basically for sub DPS purposes only. The Lord of Geo needs weapons to protect his safe harbor, so what'll those be? Favonius Lance will be fantastic for a support Li. Sure, you don't really need the ER, but that way he can offer your entire team white energy particles. It's a fantastic piece of additional utility. Great weapon choice. Black Tassel is cheap, budget-friendly, and a stat stick that anybody can use to make his shield bulkier. Fav Lance is preferable due to the extra team-wide utility that it offers, but Black Tassel ups his shield protectiveness considerably if you need that. Plus, it's about as budget-friendly gets. Neat. Staff of Homa will be his absolute best in slot for sub DPSing, HP percent to flat attack conversion to aid with his split scalings, 20% HP for free, and a crud ton of crit damage, all tied together by a nice amount of base attack too. If you want a 5-star weapon that'll make your Geo Lizard hit like a truck, then this is the way to go. All other 5-star polearms are essentially stat sticks that boost his damage through offering some amount of crit percent, attack percent, or burst percent. Deathmatch works too as a stat stick. After all, you get a lot of crit rate from it. Even if you get the lower end of the attack buff, it's still a pretty good buff. Because the Abyss usually features smaller enemy waves, expect to get the higher attack buff most of the time. You'll get the smaller one more often in theater. Catch works too if you want to play him as a burst sub DPS, as it gives him a whole crud ton of burst percent while covering for all of his potential ER needs. The others mentioned will be better for his personal damage, but this works nicely as a free-to-play sub DPS option. I'm begging you to avoid Vortex Vanquisher. It's garbage. Easily the worst signature weapon in the game. At least Everlasting Moonglow is best in slot for a DPS Kokomi, and Baiju's weapon is still pretty good on him. What in the actual heck would your justification be for pulling for this useless stick? Avoid it at all costs. Awful weapon, even with split scalings in mind. Once again, I think the utility of these weapons matters a lot more than the damage that they help him do, unless you're specifically going for a sub-DPS build. To be honest, if you only want to build him as a support only, then this section would have ended after Black Tassel. Only consider the damage-based options if that's specifically what you're going for. So, who shall form the squad that will punish all those who disobey their contracts? Well, here's the thing. We'd be here all day if I went over every single character in the game, because that's the thing. He works with almost every single character in the game. So instead, I'm gonna go over his best installed team archetypes and provide some example teams at the end of each archetype. Comment down below if there's a more specific team that you'd like to ask me about. I'll tell you whether it's good or bad. So for starters, hypercarry teams. If your main carry is getting staggered a lot due to the chamber or due to clunkiness within gameplay, Zhongli can help keep him stable in exchange for less team damage. Using him does mean that you're missing out on using a buffer in his place. However, he will offer your hyper teams a super comfortable time if you're struggling with survivability in them. Example teams include Neuvillette, Farina, Kazuha, Zhongli, Arlecchino, Yolan, Bennett, Old Guy, Linny, Farina, Bennett, Fossil, Mualani, Xiangling, Nihida, Dinosaur. Mono Geo teams aren't all that strong, however they also happen to be the one place where sub-DPS Zhongli is pretty good. His burst is a neat downtime filler, and because of all of the Geo-based buffs going on, he can pack a pretty nasty punch here. Ito with Shilonen plus double Hydro is stronger these days, however, if you're looking to play Hyper Mono Geo, then sub-DPS Lee shines quite brightly here. Do note that using him with Noelle here would be extremely redundant due to the fact that she shields and heals by herself already. Example teams include Ito, Goro, Chiori, Zhongli. Ito, Goro, Albedo, Big Dragon Dude. The double Geo core is a pretty strong use case for him. While it's been power crept by the wheelchair combo of Shilonen plus Chiori, you can still utilize him as a flexible double Geo teammate. Using him with the cutting edge of fashion means that she won't have any Geo-construct issues since Zhongli is there. That's assuming that your cutting edge is C0. He can work alongside Shilonen too, with his universal Res Shred stacking on top of her Res Shred as well. Using Chiori over him would be better, sure, but it's still a viable team core that exists. You can slot it basically anywhere to turn any team good, which is awesome. 4-piece Intercity Kachina is another splendid pair with him who will work just as well. Example cores include the DJ, the Elderly, Delicate as Silk, Moneyman, Drill Kid, and Rockfella. When it comes to Dendro teams, you'll mainly find yourself using him in spread teams. He can work nicely in Aggravate too, but the fragile nature of somebody like Greg means that he lends himself quite well to using the Lord of Geo. He's a very comfy slot in here and acts as a wonderful replacement if you don't have Baiju. Example teams include Greg, Yaimiko, Nihida, Zhongli, Flicker, Yaimiko, Nihida, Retirement Home. Him in driver-based comps works fine too, as long as he isn't interrupting what is being driven. Then he acts as a fairly flexible slot-in. Just note that he could be awkward sometimes, as you might rather use a healer over him if it's a team which could potentially drive Farina, for instance. Example teams include Raiden, Xingqiu, Yolan, Zhongli, Hutao, Xingqiu, Yolan, Pebble, Child, Bennett, Xiangling, the Dude. Your grouping will be bricks here, just keep that in mind. Then finally, a bit of an umbrella archetype for quote-unquote fragile characters. Essentially characters who don't specifically need a shield, but can benefit from having one due to clunk issues in specific circumstances. This mostly applies to Bow and Catalyst DPSs. Example characters like this include Ganyu, Mualani, I swear Linny is not too bad to play shieldless, but he can be a menace sometimes, Greg, Scaramouche, you get the point. Any somewhat fragile character can sacrifice their team's max damage potential in exchange for better survivability. They will almost always have better options available to them, but if you're struggling to clear, then using Rex Lapis may actually get you better results than using their best installed team, because he may end up being more practical in your specific case. Also, fine for all of you physical Zhongli individuals. Zhongli, Raiden, Mika, Farina, have fun. He works in every team in the game. There is no world in which you do not have a team for him, because because you can slot him with basically anyone and anything. Comment down below if you're skeptical regarding a specific synergy. Yet how does this man of many ears work? Well, his normal attacks will deal 6 physical strikes. This doesn't do much for him aside from look cool. As for his skill, it has both a press and a hold. Pressing it will summon one large pillar. This pillar pulsates to deal small geo damage to nearby enemies. If there are other constructs nearby, it will spread their pulsation to deal even more geo damage. Holding it summons his all-too-famous shield, the skill issue vanquisher of Genshin, or propagator I suppose, considering how this guy's responsible for so many players not being able to dodge. His hold will drain nearby geo shields down very quickly, and deal some geo damage when he does it too. The shield scales off of his HP. The shield is super strong, and a really nice gimmick is that for as long as the shield is up, all of your on and off-field characters will receive a 20% universal res shred, so even off-field damage sources like Shangling's Pyronado or Farina's 3 little guys are being buffed. This helps compensate for the fact that you lose a buffer when you slot him into your team, and this ability is unique as it shreds physical, dendro, and animal res too, certainly the main meat of his kit. You can also make a wiener with it. As for his burst, he'll say, "I will have order, Sunday style," and crash a huge boulder upon enemies. It'll deal AoE geo damage and petrify enemies for a few seconds. It's a nice bit of crowd control, and petrification is a unique type of crowd control that only Zhongli is capable of dealing to this very day. However, sadly, the burst's cast time is far too long for it to be worth using. It's much better to simply use the time that it would take to cast his burst to deal damage or generate energy with other party members. Plus, even when built as a sub-DPS, his damage is underwhelming. Sure, a 200 to 300k meteor is impressive on its own, but not when it takes so long to come down. It's a good downtime filler at best, unless you need it for shield breaking or its crowd control. I wouldn't build around this optimally speaking, but ultimately it is your choice. As for his Ascension passives, simple. His A1 makes his shield stronger. That's it. Very self-explanatory. It's a fine passive that helps him achieve his main task. As for his A4, this offers him additional scalings based on his HP, but as we've already discussed, his damage is super underwhelming, so this is kind of a dead A4, but it's nice for all of you sub-DPS users out there as it allows you to get more mileage out of weapons like Staff of Homa. As for his talent priority, simple, go for this. As I have said many times throughout this video, you should be ignoring his burst unless you're specifically interested in it. His shield is ridiculously strong, so leveling it to 8 should be more than enough. 9 in a worst case scenario. 10 is just overkill, or you're just a simp, which yeah, alright, that's fair enough. Only level his burst if you actually intend to use it, and ignore his normal attacks unless you're a physical Zhongli maniac. Or even crazier, a cryo Zhongli user. If you know, then you know. This guy's always getting others to pay for his stuff, so now it's our turn. Let's talk Constellations. On second thought, Zhongli's going broke because holy heck what a useless C1. Unless you want to make a double wiener with him, this is totally useless. This makes his burst more worth using as it casts his shield as well. Sub-DPS Lee is more worth using at this point, but compared to modern day C2s, his damage will still be underwhelming at this point, and the value of his Constellation is very low when compared to the other C2s that we have now. If you need a +3 to his shield, then dang, you must really have a bad case of skill issue-itis. Not a bad C4 when stacked upon a C2, he's more worth it as a sub-DPS now, otherwise kind of a whatever Constellation. A +3 to his burst is actually welcome at this stage, since if you've come this far in his lineup, I have a hard time believing that you're building him as a shield bot. The only use for a C6 is offering you another Farina healer. That's it. Horribly underwhelming C6, just use any of the 50 billion 4-star healers that we already have in the game. To put it lightly, his Constellations are garbage, especially nowadays. His C2 is decent, otherwise the rest are just mid to bad. His signature weapon also sucks, so if you want to provide him some heavy Primogen-based investment, then go for Staff of Homa. Please, I beg of you to avoid Vortex Vanquisher. If you really want to build him as a sub-DPS, go for C2, but be aware that he is one of the most underwhelming high-investment characters of all time. His insane free-to-play friendliness sadly came at the cost of his whale investment being garbage. Zhongli really is an everyman character. He will work everywhere while not being particularly best in slot anywhere. That's usually my arch nemesis. However, I can understand that this guy is the most subjective character in the entire Genshin meta. A casual on a laggy phone will value him at S, whereas a speedrunner who values nothing but damage and quick clears would see him as a C tier character at best. His comfort is unparalleled, and if you need what he offers these days, you will be very satisfied. However, if you're content with your skill as a player, I'd say he's not as needed anymore. Regardless, he'll always be a reliable fella. Definitely let me know what you think about this guy down below in the comments. Also, quick notice for anybody who doesn't know yet, I've opened up a second channel where I intend to post silly ZZZ content. Go have a look and subscribe if you're interested in some laid-back ZZZ stuff. Hopefully this video is able to get your Zhongli crushing his enemies with the Wrath of the Rock. This has been Juice, signing out, and the only thing that his shield can't protect himself from are the expensive fees imposed upon him from Nouvelette's court sessions.